Greetings and welcome everybody to another episode of the Decision Hour. I am your host, Adam Bird, and I'm going to bless you with a very special gentleman, somebody who I'm honored to call brother. He's no stranger to the HMG network. In fact, he and his lovely wife have been on the show before. My brother John is going to come on, and we're going to start. John and I has agreed to come onto the show for the next several episodes, at least to start off. And John and I, we're going to do a series called "Let's Have a Conversation." So, without further ado, all the way from others across the pond, John, how are you, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing very well, Adam. Thanks for having me on. It's been great coming up with this idea, and thanks for executing it. I mean, I think it's going to be some excellent conversation and some good material.
Yeah, you and I have been talking about this one for a while, and what's funny is every time we get off the phone, not only do I learn something, but it gets the wheels turning in other directions as well. It's just like, man. And that's what our goal is for you, the listener, is to not only provide some type of education, and this is more than just entertainment, but John and I really hope through this series that you take what we say, and whether you believe it or not is really, we want you to kind of just get to start thinking for yourself, and two, ask questions and sit down and have conversations with people about it. So that's kind of where we're going. So John, why don't you tell the listeners what this first topic is about?
Yeah, well, we wanted to, Adam and I wanted to kind of start broad, and we decided that we wanted to begin with founding principles for our country.
Okay.
And we wanted to explore them.
So like what the country was founded on, just to be clear, yes?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. What were those ideas?
Okay.
And you know what? There's a lot more, a lot of people might rattle off a few things, but there's a lot more to it than you might think. And this isn't meant to be a civics class. It's meant to be a conversation.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably jump down quite a few rabbit holes along the way, just like we did in our conversation the other day. But ultimately, we want to present some info to folks. We want to have conversation and kind of wrestle with these ideas a bit and see where we are today in our country, and what can we do to change things back to our founding principles.
I've heard them also called first principles.
Yep.
As well, and I believe that these values that were of a bias of at that time frame of what was also called the American experiment.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Well, and it was an experiment, so we can kind of start with that. And first of all, I just want to disclaim, I was a history major in college, but I spent the rest of my life in the Marine Corps. So I'm not.
So there's absolutely no credit here at all. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm not sitting here claiming to be some sort of a constitutional scholar or something like this. That's why we're calling this "Let's Have a Conversation," and that's, people having a conversation about these kinds of things is one of the things that we want to get people motivated to do.
Right.
But yes, it was an experiment,
and
the founders, after the country was founded, after the Constitution was ratified, and we had a lot of things going on over a pretty decent period of time. So, 1776, we did the Declaration. We ended up, winning the war against England, and then we finally ratified the Constitution, 1789. I believe that's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but 1789. So, a decent amount of time passed, and So we finally get this country established. And well, then we've got the Articles of Confederation, which didn't work out too well. And, so that's why we had to come up with the Constitution. So there was a lot of changes going on. And then pretty quick, we had the War of 1812, where Britain invaded us again. We were at war with Britain again. So it's not like our founders just magically said, "Hey, I got a good idea. Let's make a country." Bam, and it all fell into place. It was a long process, and they viewed it as an experiment. Let's see if we can make this work, because what we have is very unusual, not just in today's world, but in the history of mankind. It's extremely unusual.
Yeah.
Nobody's been able to pull it off for as long as we have.
Right. And I've in preparation to this particular episode, it was I was reading something online, and let me see here, where those of you that are listening to this, if you're listening to it, means you're already online. Open up another browser, go to whatwouldthefoundersthink.com, and this is in no affiliation to the individual that wrote this article. I'm not promoting this person by any means. I'm simply using it as a reference for this conversation today. But there were 5 principles of the government that were firmly held by all 55 delegates to the Constitutional Convention, and these principles directed the design of the Constitution of the United States, of what we know as of today. And in this article, it seemed like a lot of the founders were influenced by a gentleman by the name of John Locke.
Absolutely. John Locke.
Excuse me, John Locke.
Right. I believe that is the correct pronunciation. It's John Locke.
Okay. Yes. So the first and foremost, and when I go to the principles, I think of the principles, John, as the government worked for the people, not the people working for the government. And this particular article here says the number one, rights come from God, not the government.
Very much so. So yeah, one of the founding principles that's in the Declaration of Independence is that people are governed at the consent of the people, by the consent of the government.
Right.
The government is there at the consent of the people, and that is one of the unalienable, self-evident truths that they called out, along with the concept of equality and the rule of law.
Yeah.
And those are pretty broad. I mean, books and volumes have been written on each one of those.
Wow.
But
you talk about law, it's funny because there are well over 1 million laws on the federal books today.
Yeah.
And if somebody created a analytics program that ran, bots and stuff through all the laws and compared it to the original 10 laws of man, I'm talking about the 10 Commandments, right. and it's simple, and it goes, if you follow the 10 Commandments, you will not break any of the 1 million+ laws that are on the books today. And those of you that are listening, I want you to think about that right now. Yep. Now, whether you're a Christian or not, if you're not, that's fine. No, I don't judge. This is probably geared more towards Christ followers and whatnot, but if you believe in the 10 Commandments and you follow the 10 Commandments, you will not break a single law that man has written throughout time.
So it's interesting that you bring that perspective up. So the founding document, which is the Declaration of Independence, they declared independence from England, and and that founded their country. Of course, we had to fight a war still, or that founded our country. We still had to fight a war for it. But there is a constant 4 or 5 times the concept of God is referred to in the Declaration. Now, before anybody gets you know, too worked up,
Right.
about anything. Um, it's deriving the document and the self-evident truths, deriving their authority from God. So some folks out there might remember studying the divine right of kings back in school. European history, you would have heard a lot about it. Uh, Even monarchs, even despots, were appealing to, were getting authority from God. So this goes in a lot of directions, but I think it's very important to think about, we in the Declaration refer to self-evident truths.
Mm-hmm.
We refer to God in several different ways. The unalienable rights are endowed by our Creator. Um, he's referred to as a judge, I think like the great judge of the
Mm-hmm.
world or something in there. And then at the end, I think the last reference to him is as divine providence, and that is in a pledge that the founders, the people who uh, signed the Declaration of Independence, made to each other before God, and they pledged their lives and their sacred honor to each other, and with the guidance of divine providence, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
it's interesting that you bring that up, because it's actually very important. And again, I'm not trying to sound like a college professor. This is just stuff I've read about and I've studied on my own, and I really think it's important. When in our founding documents, when we're talking about self-evident truths, we're talking about a universal, unchangeable truth, and that is it is derived from God, divine providence, the judge of the great judge of the world, or I'd have to look it up, but it's derived from God, endowed by our Creator. So truth is something that is for all time, and it's unmalleable. It's not changeable. The truth is the truth, and so I think it's really important to note that, because I've noted in the past 20 years or so that it seems that the truth is somehow,
I think the truth keeps getting bended to fit
yeah,
other people's narrative, whatever or whomever is looking at it at that any given time.
yeah,
The fact of the matter is the Constitution is a contract that was delegated by the people that gave the government limited power.
right,
In short, it's the government works for the people, not the other way around. In the
absolutely,
last, I don't know, I'd say 30 years, at least as long as I've been alive, that and I would say really the last 25 years is where it's really started to try to flip the narrative, where the government's really trying to take in a lot more control over it. And again, I've only been on this earth for 43 years, so I'm just going off of what I can remember as a kid when Reagan was the popular president, good president, and then you move forward after that, and you slowly start to see things not equaling.
yeah. So
Be like people. It's like the government slowly taking part. Like, I hate to use it, but all of last year you used the pandemic, and I'm going to say this is you. It's like we're being trained for something, and this. I'm not trying to sound like conspiracy theory, but like, hey, if we make people wear this and we just mandate this and make it happen, then eventually they'll just get used to it and they won't complain about it anymore.
Well, so think about this. Depending on what state you were in,
And that's just an example. I'm using that as an example because it's the most recent thing I can think of.
right? And so I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But I think it's important to note that one of the principles of our government, the structure of our government, is a federalist government. That means that we split power between the federal government, the national government, and the states. And then the states delegate further down to other local governments. Things at the time were very local. You know, if you lived in Georgia and if the and something was happening in New York, that was a long way away.
Right.
Washington, the cap, depending on what time frame, but let's just say Washington, that was a long way away from a lot of folks. And so things were local. Things were conceived as local. Patrick Henry, in particular in Virginia, and most of the anti-federalists were, by definition, local. They wanted to keep power as close to home as they could. And the reason why that we seem to have lost touch with is they had just fought a war. And so they were very careful when they wrote the Constitution, when they wrote the Bill of Rights. In fact, the Bill of Rights came from objections and folks who were not willing to ratify it. They insisted on the Bill of Rights. And so the Federalists actually made a political move and came up with the Bill of Rights in order to steal the anti-federalist thunder. But that's a political move. So partisanship is not new. But it was, they expected tyranny to rise again. They had read history. They knew about the Roman Empire. They'd studied the classics. They had studied history. They were all fairly well educated men, and most of them were brilliant. And they expected tyranny to raise its ugly head again.
Right.
So they put a lot of checks and balances. They put a lot of shock absorbers into the system to try to make it hard as possible for tyranny to arise. But local, and you and I talked about this the other day,
right,
things were much more local. And you're absolutely right. The coercive power of the federal government has grown beyond anything we might have imagined. Between governmental offices and budgets, well, it's about 50% of the economy now, and about 20 million state and federal workers they're working in the administrative state,
right,
and they're unelected, and they can make things go fast or slow, or they can really affect things.
Yeah, it's called job security.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
We called it the Empire. When I was at Pax River, when I was in acquisitions in Pax River or up at the Pentagon, we called it Empire Building.
Yeah.
Somebody would get a pet project, the next thing you know.
So one of the things that in this article, the third thing that they believed was limited representative republic, and I'm gonna read a section out of this here. Is the founders believed in limited government in the form of representative republic. They distrusted a direct democracy because they equated it to mob rule.
Yes.
James Madison constantly preached against any system that allowed special interests to gain control of the government. He showed that throughout history, as you stated, minorities, whether it was based on race, wealth, religion, or even geography, they were treated differently, frowned upon, and whatnot. So the founders believed that to protect against government oppression, they must disperse power and give each branch of government a checks and balance, right? And that's what as we know, what our system is today. So.
So there's several ways they did that. It's beautiful. And Madison believed That was his greatest fear. So Madison was a Federalist.
Right.
His greatest fear was the tyranny of the mob. Um, the Anti-Federalists, let's see, Jefferson, Patrick Henry, some of those guys, their greatest fear was a tyrannical federal government. So there was a balance they were trying to strike.
Right. So so what you're saying is they agreed on stuff back then. And where was I going with this? They had their different beliefs as far as political affiliation back then.
Sure.
But they sat down and have conversations to work together for the better of the people.
And that's where you and I come in.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think, how we started our conversation about doing a series like this.
Well, John, I can hear people right now that are listening. They're like, well, John, you know, that's great that you and Adam are talking about this, but that was, you know, several hundred years ago, and times have changed. Okay, great. I here's my response to that. Yes, times have changed. We've had movements, we've had technology, we've had laws come and go. But the thing that I think that has changed the most from today, as we sit here and record this, to 200 plus years ago when this took place, is that the government has a lot more control over our lives now than they did back then.
Without a doubt, the coercive power of the state is tremendous. So I can think back to when I was just about to turn 18, and the drinking age in the entire nation, to my knowledge, well, at least the states around, the most states, the drinking age was 18 years old.
Right.
And the federal government came out with a mandate, not exactly a law, a mandate that drinking ages be changed to 21.
Right.
And as coercion, they tied federal highway funds to it. So all of a sudden, they're taking back millions of dollars in federal highway funds. All of a sudden, states get in line. Next thing you know, the age is 21.
It's
so that's
kind
just
of the you scratch my back, I scratch yours kind of a thing. So it's basically meaning. And let me explain what I mean by that. So the federal, if the state asks for something, then the federal government be like, great, we'll give you that, but you're going to give us this, and it's almost a. It seems like nowadays that the federal government just has everything, and they use everything as a bargaining tool. I honestly feel like, that the federal government does not have our best interest in the majority of things. And I say that as, you know, we're military veterans. We both have children that are getting ready to go into the military. Some that you have one that's in the military currently.
Yep.
Do they have our best interests, or are they doing this to line their own pockets?
Well, now that's a whole debate.
Right.
My answer to that is hell no. The federal government does not have it doesn't have a soul.
Right.
It's made up of people.
But what I'm trying, and I say all of that to tie that into what our current topic is today, which is the founding principles of everything. You know, the what was it? The National Guard was started in like 1675, 1635, whatever it was. I should know better. But you didn't have people out there picking a fight, doing this, doing that, playing Big Brother across the world or anything like that. And more importantly, you didn't have the federal government coming into, well, I guess at the time, North Carolina, South Carolina, saying, this is what you're going to do. You had the states telling the people, hey, this is where, and I think that's what we need to go back to now. We have to do a complete I want to say mind shift, but we have to get in the mindset of getting involved at the local level,
Yeah.
then at the state level. And that's how we start getting this country back on track with what our founding principles were
Yep.
originally.
Yeah, 100%. And I would go a step further, and say, I try to do this. I fail often, but take a look at yourself first. No kidding. Govern yourself.
Yeah.
Govern yourself and control yourself first. Because God knows if you're a mess and you go run for school board, next thing you know, we've got, critical race theory being taught in our schools, teaching everybody to be a racist. But look at yourself. Try to clean yourself up and make yourself better, make your family better, make your neighborhood better. But yeah, we've got to start. And I say we, I mean citizens,
Right.
need to start running for school boards, getting on school boards, running for city council, getting involved in the community. The suburbs and the cities have become we come home, we close the door, we turn on Netflix, we go to bed, we get up, we go to the office and do it all over again. And we just kind of don't have time. It's like, we don't have time. And then there's this whole myth, this whole lie that has been thrust upon the American people that it's not polite to discuss politics.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up.
We don't want to discuss politics. Well, it's
because they want to dumb you down?
I'm sorry?
Because they want to dumb us down?
I don't know that it's so much I don't know that it's a conspiracy that, somebody at the top of the heap is telling everybody, but somehow it became impolite to discuss politics, even among families. And you've got to have those arguments. We've lost the art. It's not even an art. We've lost the doggone, it's just common decency to be able to disagree with somebody and still sit across the table from them, have a cup of coffee and have a conversation. You go, you know what? That just doesn't make any sense to me. That sounds crazy to me. Can you explain that further? Ask a question. Have a conversation. Say, you know what I think's right? I think this is what's right. I had one of my best friends in the world, one of the most moral, upstanding people I've ever met, is a friend of mine from the Marine Corps. And many, many years ago, 95 or 6 or something, we were broken down in DC. Our helicopter broke down and we were stuck. And we had this great conversation over beer. And I found out that he was an atheist. And I'm like, really? And so we had this great conversation, which we completely disagreed. We were on total opposite sides, right. And yet we were sipping beer and having a great time and just discussing. And it was a long conversation that we had. And I learned a lot about his point of view. And I'm sure he learned a lot about my point of view. But we've lost that courtesy.
Yeah.
We extend to other people.
Amen.
Where we sit down and we go, hey, you're for abortion, huh? Can you tell me why, instead of, I don't know, threatening to blow the guy up or something?
I love having those types of conversations.
Yeah,
I absolutely love it because it's very educational, and I look at it as like you call it common courtesy, and it's just showing respect to somebody else. Meaning, it's okay that you don't, like John and I probably don't agree on everything. I don't know. We haven't explored probably everything yet, but there's probably certain things that we don't agree on. But I have so much respect for this man that I'll sit and I'll listen to it because I learned stuff from that. And that's how we as a society learn, is that we have to, it's okay. Listen, this isn't a perfect world. It's not rainbows and unicorns and all that other bullshit, right? It's people disagree, and that's fine. It's how you handle yourself when you disagree with somebody that's going to determine what happens moving forward. I'll give you an example if I can real quick. A friend of mine that I worked with at one of my corporate jobs, older gentleman. I say old. He's older than me. By a, well, he's old enough to be my dad.
Right.
And he just happens to be black. And we've gone to lunch. We've gone on trips together. And when everything kind of kicked off last year, he started making these posts on social media, and I was like, man, that just doesn't seem like his character. So but he's always been supportive of what I've done. He's always liking my posts. He's always do this and that. But so I finally reached out and said, hey man, it's been a while. We need to chat. I got to ask you a question. Help me understand where you're coming from with your viewpoint, and help me understand your viewpoint because you being a black man looking at what's going on in the world today. 3-hour conversation. And it was back and forth. I said, all right. And he was like, this is how I look at it, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I'm not saying this is bad. I'm not saying I believe in BLM. He's like, I initially thought that it was something good, but then it turned out to be something different. So I don't, and so we had that type of conversation. And at the end of it, we didn't agree on everything.
Sure.
But we had a great laugh afterwards. And it was like, hey, thank you, because I've learned so much tonight on somebody else. There used to be that saying, John, you never really know how somebody feels or what somebody's gone through until you walk the mile in their shoes.
Yeah. I 100% agree with that.
I liked what you said earlier is you said we don't give people that courtesy anymore. And it's sad. We've become a lazy society. And I say lazy because, we watch TV or we believe everything. We've become puppets. I'll just say it. There's a lot of us have become puppets where you believe stuff. And you don't give people the common courtesy if they disagree with you.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah. It's spilled over onto the national stage, as we've seen, where there's no discussion. So one of the things that, and this is just a personal anecdote, that in the wake of the 2020 election, there was a lot of questions being asked about whether or not that election was conducted properly in a lot of states. Yeah. And I found it, the reaction, the suppression and the censorship and all that, I was like, well, that tells me that you got something to hide.
Right.
If we were really, if the other side was really interested, I mean, think about,
you did it all of these years and you didn't put these into place when you could have, and now all of a sudden you put it into place because you're like you said, you got something to hide. You're afraid of people finding out the actual truth.
Right. If you're an honest broker, and I think people should be, I don't know if we have any honest brokers in Washington or not. I hope there's a few, but there's damn too few.
Yeah.
But if you're an honest broker, you'd go, oh, you're concerned about that? Well, I don't think that happened, but yeah, let's go take a look. And I'm not kidding. Think about there's people out there who produce products and stuff or do services for a living. Yeah. And if you've got a customer and they come to you and they say, hey, I needed you to take that brush away when you took that tree down. Oh, really? I'm sorry. I didn't understand that. I thought this. Yeah, I needed you to haul that away. Okay, well, let's come to an agreement.
Yeah.
Right. It's not that different. And so there's a lack of civility. And honestly, Adam, I'm going to use the word ignorance, and it's not really meant in a derogatory way. I think sometimes that gets used in a derogatory way. It simply means not knowing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are ignorant. Not that they're uneducated. Some of the most educated people on the planet are also some of the more ignorant people, because expertise is very narrow. And I just think folks don't know. Young people. You talk to very young people, and there's a tremendous number of them who buy into this whole idea. Oh, what was going on with Antifa and BLM. I support that because I support black people. I'm like, well, of course you support black people. Decent people support, everybody's right to do it
Right.
they want. But let's look at, the truth.
The basis of it.
Yeah, the basis of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's racist on its face,
Right.
right? It's Marxist in ideology.
Yeah.
Um, that's just one example, a recent example.
And I look at it as, I liked how you said ignorant. A lot of people are smart, but they're ignorant. I look at it as it's communication. How it's being presented. And if you have a question, ask. I don't think people ask as many questions as they should. I think they're too afraid to ask questions.
Well, they're not engaged. So
right. It's like, that doesn't affect me directly. Yeah, but it does.
But it does. A lot of things do. So we're seeing it in Northern Virginia now in the Loudoun County School Board, that meeting, everybody, that's made national news and stuff. Well, it's parents who are all of a sudden they realized and they're like, oh God, I do not support this. And so they show up at the school board and they raise hell. And it's inspired a lot of people to actually run for the school board.
Right.
It's inspired a lot of people. Retired Navy SEAL. He was in that movie, Act of Valor. He played Senior Chief Otto. At any rate, his name is Derek something. Anyway, inspired him to run for either Congress or Senate. I'm not sure which, but he's like, that's it. I don't like what's going on. I'm running. So people are, they're starting to get engaged, but that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation with you on, Heroes Media Group, to try to inspire some folks to get involved. Because a lot of times, I'll have conversations with people. I write a lot of articles about leadership and stuff. And, people ask me questions.
Yeah.
Hey, what can I do? Well, here's what you can do. There's a lot of things you can do, but honestly, try to educate yourself as much as you can about our founding principles and get yourself armed.
I want to say something real quick, John, because you said educate people, and I want to be clear on something. When you educate yourself, don't read one article and just assume that that's what it is. Read several articles that support that article, and then find an article that goes against what you've read, and read a few articles like that, and then come up with your own conclusion on what's right.
Well, I encourage people to go to primary sources as well.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say, go to primary sources, reliable sources that don't suck. And if you can find people or sources that are tied to whatever topic it is that you're looking at, go to them. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But
and it ain't hard to study the Constitution. It's not hard to study the founding documents, the Declaration of Independence. It's not hard to read the Federalist Papers. They're a little bit of they're a little funky because the language is a little weird, but it's not hard to find a lecture or something on YouTube from credible folks.
So one of the things, and you're talking, and I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the founding principles. And I guess I should probably go back for a second and say it's obvious that during the whole constitutional convention, delegates, they didn't agree on everything, which is why they argued for about 4 months before it was actually drafted and completed, right? But the founders were influenced by Adam Smith and the firm beliefs that in private property rights. And at the time, private property rights were they were kind of entwined with liberty. So and James Adam quoted, and I quote, "As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights." And what he means by that is that if a person owned nothing, he still owned his rights, which
Yeah.
is the most valuable property that we have as people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And it is the most precious thing we have. And I'm not, and I don't think that most people realize it. And I don't think that most people really even understand the unalienable God-given rights that they have, that human beings have. Now, this is human beings. This is
Right.
not just Americans. It's all human beings. These are natural, unalienable rights derived from our Creator, or granted by our Creator, or whatever the exact language is.
Right.
Um,
How do we get back to,
yeah,
or how do we get back to the founding principles? How do we encourage? How do we get where we are now to start that shift?
so
And
first,
I think we've started a little bit. There's been a little bit of a shift lately, but how do we get back to where, hey, listen, there's more of, first off, as a republic, we the people need to realize that there's more of us than there are them. Now, I'm sure the fact that this is on the internet and it's being streamed and listened to on other platforms. I know it's being listened by other agencies and whatnot. This is no means a threat against the government or an overtaking or anything like that. This is merely to spark conversation between people. So let me throw that disclaimer in there first.
well, as one of the, but I don't mean to jump on it too much, but as one of the unalienable rights, people, people have a right to govern or to be governed at their consent.
Right.
And, that's one of the grievances that was listed against King George in the Declaration. One of the 25 was that, he had become arbitrary and was no longer protecting their rights, which they had as Englishmen, or as British citizens.
British citizens, yeah.
I mean, God, I've watched lectures that are, 2 hours long on just a few sentences of the Declaration, but you ask, how do we get back to it? Honestly, I think it comes down to the individual, which is wherever this all starts, right? Because each individual human being is endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights. Among these are life. What is it? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Happiness.
Yep.
I think I got that right. Let me see.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. Yeah. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness not being in some hedonistic manner. Happiness meaning that a person has the freedom to pursue what they want in order to fulfill themselves and to better themselves and their family and their loved ones. Basically, to do what they need to do in order to try to make a living, in order to make their way in the world. But how do we get back to it? So I said it starts with the individual. I honestly believe that people need to take an hour, just an hour, watch a couple of videos on YouTube about, because it's a great resource about the Constitution and some of the meanings behind it, about the Declaration and some of the meaning behind it. It doesn't take that long. You don't have to have a master's degree. This is not rocket science.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of rocket science what the guys did back then. I mean, it's amazing the government that they put together, the blueprint that they laid out for us. But I think we just, educate yourself just so you know at least the slightest bit what you're talking about, and understand. And then talk to someone else. Go on a podcast with Adam Bird. Go to a PTA meeting. Go to a school board meeting. Go to a town council meeting.
Get involved. Get involved. You got to get involved. Get involved in your community, and you should
have a conversation.
Yeah.
Have a conversation with a neighbor.
Well, that's it, and that's that's the other thing I want to touch on. John says have a conversation. That means you can't be afraid to have a political conversation with your neighbor, or
Yeah.
your family member, or a complete stranger, whomever. You can be
Right.
respect. Here's the funny thing about life. This is a great thing about life. You can disagree with somebody and still respect them. Oh,
Absolutely. 100%.
I mean,
Too much now. I see conversation getting shut down where somebody just says, uh, I don't like where this is going. I don't want to have this conversation anymore and I'm leaving.
that's how
You know,
things never get resolved, folks.
well, and I had a I had something like that happen not too terribly long ago. And oh, we were having a conversation about something and it was political or at least peripherally political. And they said, well, we're just going to have to agree to disagree. And I'm like, you don't even understand what we're disagreeing about. We can't agree to disagree
Right.
because you don't even know what we're disagreeing about.
Yeah.
And I guess that's all I'm asking folks is to at least understand what you're disagreeing about. And with that, you can take it into a public forum. I mean, it's irresponsible for us as citizens, as individuals who are endowed with certain unalienable rights by our Creator, in order to put a government into place which happens to be the most powerful, most free, most liberal, in the classic sense, country that has ever been on the face of the planet.
Right.
Irresponsible to go to the voting booth, to go to the public square without knowing at least a little bit and saying, look, I thought about this. I thought about this deeply. And here's my opinion. I would like to share it with you. You got to kind of at least be trying.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that because I was thinking, listen, you can't complain if you're not getting involved.
Well,
and here's why I say that. If you're involved in trying to make a difference, that's one thing. If you're complaining and you're sitting on your butt in front of the TV and not doing anything in the community, not trying to make a difference, or then don't complain about it because you haven't done anything to make it better, or to make it whether better or worse, whatever, to make that change into a direction in which you want to go. If you believe in that, then get involved. And here's the thing, and it could be as simple as just simply having a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a conversation at a barbecue, with a friend. It doesn't have to be you on a soapbox in the middle of the town square with people, all around you.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that. I think people have, again, back to our, the suburban life in particular, the city life in particular, where people are just, they're detached from those around them. They're not connected. There's not conversations happening across the fences.
Right.
And I think that's problematic. And we see it. We see that people are not talking to each other and the people are not understanding and hearing each other. We see that playing out on the national stage.
Oh, very much.
And it's too bad.
We can go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that post World War II England, Winston Churchill was soundly defeated by the Labour Party, by socialists.
That's a whole nother topic in itself.
Well, no, absolutely. But he fought and fought and fought, and was able to win it back and dismantle some of the really, really bad policies they had put in place. And then Margaret Thatcher came in the 80s and really put the kibosh on the socialists. And I'm sure they've snuck back in since then, but it's an ebb and flow. In other words, it's not all over, but I believe that we are really close. And I don't say that to be dramatic. I say that because we see, well, let's just look at the COVID pandemic. Most of America was under house arrest for, so we didn't have freedom of assembly. Couldn't go to church because of freedom of assembly. So you couldn't practice your, freely practice your religion.
Had to wear a mask everywhere, which
had to wear a mask, which I'm not sure what that falls under, but it ain't right.
Right.
And we've seen freedom of speech has been under attack for quite some time.
Oh, censorship. We saw a lot of censorship.
A lot of censorship, Fourth Amendment violations by the government, spying on cell phones and American citizens. Right. We know that this is occurring. Tucker Carlson announced not too long ago that the NSA, I believe it was the NSA, he said, they found out had his texts. And yeah.
Well, that's another can of worms. I'm writing that one down because I want to have a conversation on that part later.
Yeah, but we couldn't travel.
Right.
We lost our right to the pursuit of happiness because we lost our right to property, in the sense that many Americans were not allowed to go to work anymore and lost businesses, lost home.
And I think what John's really trying to say here, folks, is that everything that's happened, even just recently in the last 18 months, everything, none of it, all of it goes against the founding principles.
Absolutely. And more alarming, perhaps, than the fact that our governments, state, local, and federal governments did this to us, it went not even, you couldn't even say these rights went out the window in a whimper.
It was overnight.
Nobody stood up. Nobody did anything.
And
nobody really.
And as a listener, this is why we have said in this show, get involved. And that's why I'm pushing, get involved at the local level, because the government works for the people, not the other way around. The states, I don't want to say the states have more control over the federal government, but the federal government should not encroach on the states unless there's the one or the half a dozen things that all the states agree to make a federal law or whatnot. Correct. Otherwise, the federal government should not be. I mean, they run the military and they should focus on that's it. When it comes to the individual states,
they're sovereign.
Yeah. Federal government should not be able to come in and say, "Hey, this state's doing this. This is what we're doing." It doesn't work that way.
So these are the federal government has gotten around those powers has gotten around those restrictions by using the power of the purse. So originally they were supposed to be able to regulate interstate commerce, common defense, basically
put all these things in play to make money to use as a bargaining chip for the republic and all the states individually.
They had very few. The federal government had very few duties. It was allowed to do very little, and there was a third thing I can't remember. I can't remember, but now. It's kind of like when you tell the drill instructor that, hey, we got a new rule. We want to make boot camp softer, so you can only order the recruits to do 5 push-ups at a time. Okay, hard charger. We will make those 5 push-ups last 30 minutes.
Right.
And it's going to be hell.
Yeah.
I hope you like planking.
That's a great analogy.
So. Right. So they're not breaking the letter of the law.
They're just bending it to their advantage.
Yes, they're still getting around it. And highway funds, education funds are two fantastic examples of the coercive power of the federal governments over the states. Same thing with the universities. It's very easy. Let's just say that when the federal government says we're going to take your education funds, we're going to take your highway funds, states tend to say, how high do you want me to jump?
Yeah. They cave. They give in. It's all about the money. Here's another thing. Follow the money. That's another conversation that John and I will have at another time.
Absolutely. I told you.
This is, and we. It was funny because prior to us starting this, I said I got a notebook here and I'm taking notes because I'm sure there's going to be other conversations that stem from this particular conversation, on top of the ones that we've already decided that we wanted to talk about last week when we spoke. So, John,
Adam, I think one last point. I think honestly, every time we do one of these shows, I think it's always going to come back to what can I do to help, and it's going to be you as an individual. Brush yourself off, get off your couch, get out, talk to a neighbor, go to a school board meeting, run for office, do these things, get involved.
And with that being said, that's all the time that we have, but I'm going to end it with this. The show was called The Decision Hour. We have started a series called Let's Have a Conversation, and today's topic was the founding principles. And none of this, everything that John and I have talked about today, none of it's going to change unless you make the decision to do something about it.
Yeah.
John,
hey, we've done it.
Yeah.
We, the people, have done it. We messed it up. We got to fix it.
Amen. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Folks,
it's been a pleasure.
Make sure that you check out Simper Savage. I got to give them a shout out since John's right here. That it's the best salad dressing marinades you will find on the planet. I can vouch for that because I have it at least 3 nights a week. So make sure you go check out Simper Savage. Get their marinades. Check out Heroes Media Group, our parent network. Go check out all the great shows over there. Until next time, you've been listening to The Decision Hour.